Thank you so much for joining us today for the latest installment of the Pacific Alumni Association's Leading Voices program. I'm Erin Mettler, class of 2001, and I am this year's Pacific Alumni Association president and your host for today. I am joined by Julio Hernandez, class of 16, who, among other things, is the son of astronaut and fellow Pacific alumnus Jose Hernandez, and who just completed a 2-week stint in the Mars Desert Research Station simulator as the crew botanist. Julio became interested in sustainability as a student when he participated in Pacific's Cooperative Education Program, which is an experiential internship for engineering and computer science students. Before joining the graduate student astronauts, Julio worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and he is currently a PhD candidate in aeronautical and astronautical engineering at the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics at Purdue University. And if that isn't a mouthful for anyone else, I don't know what is. So welcome, Julio.
Thank you, Erin, for the wonderful introduction. And I do agree, it can be a mouthful at times.
So first things first, we're going to have a series of questions that you and I are going to have a conversation, and then we will open it up for the audience if they have any questions of you themselves. But first, I want to start with how you came to decide Pacific was the school for you.
So I decided to attend Pacific because UOP was the alma mater of my dad, and I knew because the campus was a smaller university than say the state universities, I would get a lot more of the close supervision or the close hands-on instruction from my professors. And additionally, the Stockton Lodi area, I consider it to be like the place for the roots of my family, where my grandparents just live off of 8 Mile Road.
Nice. So definitely a family connection to more than one area of Pacific. That's great. Were there any professors or coaches who had a special impact on you while you were at Pacific?
I would say Dr. Wyke, Dr. Chi-Wook Lee, or as what he would like to say, Dictator Lee, as how he would joke around sometimes. And I really would have to thank Dean Robbie Jane at that time for giving me the encouragement when I was a freshman to continue forward with my engineering education, because those first year courses were kind of hard.
Yeah, I think that's true. No matter what topic you're learning, those first year courses are a test to see if that's really what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that engineering can be quite challenging at times.
So while you were a student, I'm sure there were plenty of projects that you worked on, but I'm particularly interested in what you did for your senior design project.
So for my senior design project, I believe, if I recall correctly, we designed a experimental fixture or an experimental apparatus for, I believe it was Professor Lutz for his dynamics course, which was to test, say, dynamic instability with multiple degrees of freedom. It's been quite some time, but I do remember that was the first project I really had to take ownership of from start to finish, of designing, purchasing materials, and then any manufacturing that was needed.
A little bit more than here's the materials, go see what you can build. You actually had to plan out how it was going to work and, deal with any challenges and pitfalls to that design as well, huh?
Yes, exactly. But that was even though that was the first time I had a project which was very much self-guided, but I had the assistance of a team. It did really expose me to conducting projects which I could design from start to finish, and it was a really cool challenge because I was in charge of certain aspects of the design of the project.
Nice. So how would you say your experience at Pacific shaped your journey to where you are today?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I was very much involved in student life at Pacific. I was involved in robotics club, in ASUOP, the student government for Pacific, as well as in Greek life. It really gave me a lot of exposure to non-academic aspects of higher education, which rounded out my experience. So I felt like I was coming out of Pacific less as an engineer, but more as a well-rounded individual who had the engineering skill set needed, required for me to succeed in a professional workplace setting. Uh, but after Pacific, I decided to continue my education because I had so much fun at Pacific, and pursue a graduate education afterwards.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your Mars Desert research experience. So you were one of 5 graduate student astronauts, which participated in a simulator. Can you talk a little bit about how you became to be one of those 5?
So for this opportunity, it actually came about through my friendship and connection to the crew commander Dylan. He was a prospective graduate student here at Purdue University. He ended up going to UCLA, and he's also pursuing his PhD and will be completing soon. So rock on for him. Uh, we applied for this opportunity 2 years ago after assembling a team, and we were both interested in working in human space exploration field or in the aerospace field. And when
Mhm.
this opportunity came about, uh, he reached out to me and I asked him it. He asked me if I was interested. I asked him if he was interested, and we went from there. It was a 2-year process where we submitted an package as a team after we assembled it, and then the pandemic happened, and so that kind of
Oh,
drew a wrench in the plan. But things worked out in the end, where we were one of 2 teams for the entire 2021 season to actually go to MDRS and actually be an analog astronaut for this year.
that's cool. So your crew then consists solely of students, and you're all from different institutions and disciplines. And so how did you decide, or maybe how did your commander decide who got to do what? Did you have to arm wrestle or, draw straws?
I wouldn't say it was anything aggressive like arm wrestling, but we decided our roles fairly early on as to what we wanted to do. There was the crew commander, there was the crew botanist, the health safety officer, crew engineer, crew scientist, to name uh, I think 5 out of the 6 positions that we had for the crew. Um, I decided to be the crew botanist because I wanted to break out into a new field that was non-engineering because of my interest in sustainability.
So what does a crew botanist do?
So the crew botanist is in charge of the greenhouse that's at Mars Desert Research Station at MDRS. MDRS has, I believe, if I recall correctly, four buildings. The main habitations unit, which is two stories, is one big huge cylinder. But the don't let the size uh, misinterpret how much size there is on the inside. It's a pretty confined space. There's the engineering bay, there's the greenhouse, and then there's the science dome, and there's an observatory. But we didn't have an astronomer in our crew for this rotation, so we didn't use that resource. As the crew botanist, I was in charge of the greenhouse, and my experiment pertained to investigating the effects of different soil and Martian regolith compositions on the growth of plants so that we could sustainably grow and support a human settlement on Mars.
Wow, that's intense. Did you have to bring up, I mean, I assume that there was nothing there when you got there, right? So you had to bring all of the materials and supplies with you and start from scratch, or because it was only a 2-week simulator, did you have certain things that were at different stages of growth?
So you bring up a very good point. Since this was only a 2-week mission, there was a limitation to what we could do there. Um, we did have to bring in everything to the station, so I had to bring all my materials from Purdue or at least order it and send it to one of our crew members' house who lives in Denver, and then they would drive it all in their car over to Hanksville, Utah. Uh, we basically had to bring everything with us, just like what astronauts would have to do if they were to travel from Earth to Mars, stay there, and then return. Everything has to be brought in. Hopefully you don't leave any trace and you bring it back in, or you try to develop some type of more permanent settlement, which requires leaving some resources there.
Okay. So what would you say was like, how much time did you spend? I'm going to call it a shuttle because I don't know what else you call it, but how much time did you spend inside the device that you came to Mars in versus how much time did you spend on the simulated surface of Mars?
So that's a very good question, Erin. We spent the vast majority of the time within the habitation station. So either within the hab itself or any of the supporting auxiliary buildings. Although
Okay.
we did have fairly frequent EVAs or extravehicular activities where we would actually go out and walk on the surface of Mars and conduct any type of experiments out there. Some of the experiments that we did was identifying any shelters, a dexterity study when it came to gloves, or even we had a field scientist as part of our crew where we actually collected soil samples from different interesting geological locations in the surrounding area so that we can see the chemical composition and even identify if there was any life in the subsurface.
Okay. Did you have any support while you were there? I mean, obviously it's your team of 5, but did you have ground control? I'm using like totally wrong phrasing, but this is a casual conversation, so educate me.
So yes, there was a great amount of support given to us while we were there. The station is located just outside of Hanksville, Utah. Uh, the Just over one ridge, there is an on-site staff and support there who is able to respond or assist us in case of any emergencies. But for the most part, once we're in the simulation, the only communication we have with them is via email. And email connection is very poor. We're very limited in the connection, no more than 500 megabytes of data a day.
Oh, wow.
So we had to even ration that as a
Yeah.
precious resource. But the Mars Society also has volunteers from around the world in which that they serve as Capcom or Capsule Command or mission control for as another word, in which that they connect with us on a daily basis and ask us what is our progress, do we need any what's our status, and we send our daily reports to them. And if there's any issue, say that we ran across with our EVA or with the facility, they will be the primary source of contact in which that they would give us the support that we need, just like any other astronaut mission.
Okay. So what would you say is the most stressful part about this particular simulator that you participated in?
That's a very good question. It's a little bit challenging for me to say any one thing was the most challenging because it was all fairly a new experience and it was all a challenge for all of us. I
Hmm.
would have to say that the three top challenges would be the isolation, the confinement, and the limited resources. Isolation because we are located in the middle of a desert. Confinement, there we are living within close quarters with all of us, with
Sure.
all of us there, and then limited resources. There's a limited amount of food, and more importantly, water, and also internet to make our reports. But if I were to choose from one of them, I would have to say it's the limited resources. While you're out there, you have to monitor your daily usage of any of your preserved food or dried food, and even the water. And the water is not only just for consumption, but also for sanitary needs and even washing dishes, and for the food as well, because you have to rehydrate it before you cook it.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you how do you prepare for something like that? Did you like spend 2 weeks prior counting the number of ounces of water that you were consuming, or how do you go about figuring out what you're going to do in isolation for 2 weeks?
So there was some preparation before we even boarded a plane, or hopped in the car over to MDRS, uh, making sure that our equipment and our experiments were going to arrive before departure time and date. uh, and while we were also there, how we prepared was that we just monitored our usage day by day. And this was actually one of the most important tasks for crew engineer Siobhan, in which we had a tank in which we monitored how much water we had at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, and we kind of projected out to see if our usage was sustainable and would last us the entire expedition. The isolation aspect of it, I believe we were pretty well prepared due to, current global events of the
Right.
pandemic. The confinement was something we had to adjust on the fly, simply because we were introduced to each other in a virtual environment, meeting a crew and living with them in close quarters for 2 weeks was a totally different matter. But we were so fortunate that the group dynamics were just perfect and astounding, and we supported each other every single day and every single minute that we were there in the expedition. And the resources, at least we made it. we had some trouble here and there. Surprisingly enough, washing dishes takes a surprising large amount of water, and so does cooking.
I can imagine. So what is the takeaway from your mission that alumni can use? Do you have a takeaway or two that this experience kind of brought to light?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say there's two takeaways. Uh, the first takeaway is a very personal takeaway, where I had to psych myself in rather than psych myself out of this experience. It was new. I've never done it before. Uh, and I was a little bit anxious going into the expedition. And once I met with everyone and found my little niche within the group dynamics, I
Hmm.
started to thrive, and I really enjoyed the environment. And I feel like if we had more resources, I could do that for not just 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe 6 months, maybe in even a different environment such as Antarctica with this particular crew. I really enjoyed their company. And the second piece of advice I would give to alumni is that I did not know that this opportunity was available. Uh, I certainly didn't know that it existed during my time at Pacific, and I really encourage everyone to try something like this. If you're considering becoming an astronaut, becoming an analog astronaut can really put you in the environment for you to make the for you to judge whether it is a suitable or feasible career path for you. Other than that, it's fun.
That's awesome. How did you find out about this opportunity?
When I entered graduate school here at Purdue University, uh, Purdue University has, I believe, the largest number of astronaut alumni. Uh,
Mm,
I believe within the US. So we're very, very well connected to the aerospace industry. And I understood that there was something called the Mars Desert Research Station. There's an annual crew of Purdue students who go to MDRS every year. Uh, but I never thought that I was suitable. I had the skill set, or at least yet, to think of myself as being a qualified candidate
Mm.
to attend MDRS or any other analog station. So when the opportunity arose in which I could submit a package even outside of my institution with a group of friends or a group of individuals who have a wide assortment and variety of skills, I jumped on it because why not? I took the chance, I took the opportunity, and I really found it fulfilling and rewarding.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know, you said there were two simulators every year that are at this particular desert research station. Is that correct?
So it's there were two missions this year. Normally within one entire year, I believe there's upwards of 2 dozen.
Okay.
So that was the emphasis I was trying to make, in which that due to the pandemic and
Uh-huh.
varying circumstances, there are some international teams that travel from outside the US specifically to attend or to do a simulation at MDRS. Out of the normal season, my crew was one of two crews who were fully committed, and despite the global pandemic, we still went in and wanted to, you know, go on this expedition.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That makes more sense. I was trying to figure out like how does 2 weeks 2 times a year make sense, but 24
Mhm.
times a year, 2 weeks, that makes a lot more sense. Got it now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
pandemic definitely, impacted the ability of people to not only apply, but accept a nomination if they were, given one just because of travel restrictions and such.
Yes, exactly. And I'm so grateful that the Mars Society had their policies in place to protect us while we were traveling to the station, so that even though we were in confinement and isolation for 2 weeks at the station, there were so many different steps in which that we, little loops that we had to jump through to
Hmm.
protect ourselves before going into that environment.
Sure. So let's talk about your career plans a little bit. Um, Obviously, you went to Pacific, you majored in engineering, you decided to go to grad school. Uh, it sounds like you did a stint at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Was that your co-op while at Pacific, or was that after you graduated Pacific?
That was my co-op at Pacific. I did
Okay.
2 stints at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. The first one was in the Environmental Restoration Department, ERD, underneath Adrian Godinez, and there I was extracting pollutants from the water table. And my second stint was under my mentor Stanley Summer within the National Niche Facility, where I did facility maintenance on the large beams for the facility.
So how does that translate into being an astronaut, or does it?
So that's a very good question. Going into the national lab environment was very eye-opening to me, to see how research is being conducted. Even though I was just an intern, I got to talk to many scientists there, and they were telling me about how I could pursue a graduate education. And at the time, I was committed to becoming an astronaut as well. Well, I still am. I am committed to being an astronaut like my dad, but I didn't know what would be the path I wanted to take. So my time at Lawrence Livermore National Lab is what cemented my decision to pursue a graduate education to obtain the skill sets and the talent required to be a successful scientist or a competent engineer, so that I could, be qualified and be a competitive candidate to become a NASA astronaut.
Awesome. How old were you when your dad went to space?
Ooh, that's a really that's another really good question. I think I was either 12 or 13 years old. I Once you get to grad school, your basic math skills starts to plummet and you rely on your computer a
Right.
lot.
I guess what my real question is, like, what did you think your dad was doing? Like, did you think he was getting on a plane and flying to space, or did you understand kind of the mission that he was part of, or was it just something really cool that, dad was gone for a while? I'm just curious, as a young teenager, what kind of impact that had on you.
So my dad got selected to be an astronaut when I believe I wanted to say 8 or 9, maybe 10. So I didn't really know the consequence of his achievement.
Mhm.
And because I lived over in Houston, Texas, there's an unusually high concentration of astronauts surrounding NASA Johnson Space Center. I'm
Uh-huh.
so I knew some people, I knew some friends whose parents were astronauts themselves. So it wasn't so much of an unusual career that my dad was entering. It wasn't until after my dad had flown up into space, after I had matured a little bit more, that I realized that this was something very special and impactful
Mhm.
for him and also the Mexican American and Latino community.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. So, was that an automatic for you to want to follow in your dad's footsteps, or were you kind of on the fence and then discovered your passion around science and technology?
I think I did not. What's the best way to phrase this? I did not know what I wanted to do until I saw my dad's launch.
Mm.
Until I saw the ignition and the flames of the booster rockets fade into the night sky and becoming almost indistinguishable to the stars I saw above me, did I say, I want to do something like that. That's so cool. I want to do
Mhm.
it. And I that's what got me down the path of pursuing a STEM education and be wanting to become an astronaut myself. But there's no one path from point A where you are to point B where you want to be. Just as there are multiple trails from the base to the summit of any mountain.
Yeah,
Uh, Everyone has their own unique path to the top or into space. There's no one path. There's no one step, 1, 2, 3 set of instructions that you have to do. Uh,
it kind of makes it hard to say this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to do it, because you might hit a brick wall and you might have to regroup and decide, well, maybe that's not the right path, maybe it's over here, and take a little detour. So how do you stay motivated to continue on that path?
I believe one trait that I can see almost universally within all astronaut candidates is persistence, and then the second trait is adaptability, where no matter what challenges or hardships that any candidate faces, is about persisting through those hardships, overcoming those challenges, and continuing to adapt to the changing environment around you so that you can overcome your limitations, your self-imposed limitations at times, or making a sidestep and exploring a different path to still get where you want to go.
For sure, for sure. Well, Julio, we are going to open it up for some questions from the audience. So there are instructions in the chat for those of you joining us on the call. If you have a question for Julio, please use the raise hand feature and we will call on you to unmute. Mandy, I see you have a question.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, Julio. Thank you so much for being here today and telling us all about your experience. It's so nice to hear and interesting. My question is, do you think that a manned mission to Mars would actually happen or can happen in our lifetimes?
Hi, Mandy. I really appreciate your question. That's a really good one. There's so many challenges that have to be overcome to start to for a human to land on Mars, and even more beyond that, to stay on Mars in a sustainable way in a form of a settlement. I definitely think that we have the capabilities of landing on Mars. Staying there is another matter. And building a sustainable presence is going to take overcoming a few challenges, such as Well, we can build the ships to launch from Earth and get us there and land us there. But how do we support human life on a planet that is so hostile and so different from planet Earth? That's still an active area of research, but I definitely do think those questions can be addressed and answered within our lifetime. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. You did. Thank you.
All right, Erin.
Yes. First of all, thank you guys so much for this. That was very insightful. And I'd like to bring this a little bit closer to earth and ask Julio a question. Julio, so when you actually applied, that was probably a big step for you, right? And then you probably started thinking like, oh, okay, I need to prepare for this. How did you actually prepare for this whole mission? What did you do in terms of mental and physical preparation?
So that's a very good question, and thank you for asking that, Erin. I'll answer the mental preparation question first because that was actually the biggest obstacle to me. I'll be honest with y'all. There were several times leading up to the mission where I actually wanted to drop out of this commitment because I didn't think I could do it, and I was psyching myself in rather than psyching myself. I was psyching myself out rather than psyching myself in to this opportunity. And I had to just have a very honest and open conversation with my dad, who I know without a doubt he probably had the same mentality when he was walking towards Discovery before his launch. Possibly not. He's more confident than I am. I had a conversation with him, and he told me that I had to look forward to the challenges I'm going to face in life, and whether I feel prepared to overcome them or not shouldn't factor in your decision to approach them, because you'll find out one way or another. Uh, the physical aspect of preparing for the EVA is one where you have to be relatively physically fit, and knowing that the environment in which where the station is located in a high altitude desert, uh, being physically fit, at least athletically or aerobatically, is very important due to the thin atmosphere at the station location, so that you can actually successfully conduct your EVAs while you're out there. So there's some minimum standard of physical fitness that you should keep up. You know, being able to at least run for at least 30 minutes. You know, some cardiovascular exercises, but to attend a analog astronaut expedition, the physical requirements are not as stringent as an actual astronaut. However, look at pursuing these opportunities as your preparation for becoming a competitive candidate to be an actual astronaut, to actually go up into space.
Thank you.
Looks like Jasmine, you would like to say something? You may be muted.
I'm muted. I was
There you
saying hi, Julio. I just wanted to say I miss you so much, and I'm so proud to see of everything you're doing. And I'm just excited to keep following your journey.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I really appreciate you reaching out here. And I've also been following your professional growth as well. Congratulations on your recent accomplishments as well.
Thank you.
Always great to have old friends jump on and say hello.
Yes, it's certainly a treat.
And speaking of following your journey, let's jump to see some of your pictures that are on Instagram, and we'll post the link on there as well, so that way you all can follow this journey afterwards. So let's get on to there.
Caveat, I was not in charge of photography. I hope they capture my good side.
All right, so I think we can see that right here. with the entire crew completed 2 EVAs together, traveling to Pooh's Corner on the morning of 4/13/21.
Yeah, so right there what you can see is that there's 3 of us who are conducting EVA, at least in this picture. You see 2 ATVs and 1 rover. The ATVs are on the left side, the rover is on the right side. Normally what we would do is that we would take 1 ATV and 1 rover to whichever location that we would be going on our EVA to. In this case, it was Pooh's Corner, which was, I believe, maybe a 5-10 minute ride from the station itself. You can see that we're wearing I want to say like an EVA suit, which contained a large helmet that restricted your field of vision, and a backpack which contained all the mechanical equipment to circulate air within your helmet, because we did this in, I believe, mid-spring, and it was already getting pretty warm outside in the desert, so having those fans on was really much a blessing. But while we were on our EVAs, we had radios that we had connected either to our suits or to a good location where we would, radio in and communicate with each other, as well as the EVA team would communicate with the HAB module, where we always had at least one person who had a radio on them to respond to any issues that the EVA team had while they were out in the field.
All right, and let's see. Here's maybe one of those that you weren't in charge of, but Tang, tell us about that.
Okay, so Tang, it was a very refreshing drink after our EVAs. And so like we did a little bit of modeling. We were joking around saying, we're going to take these photos, send it off to Tang, and maybe we could have them post on their social media page. One, because we want to thank them for creating this magnificent, wonderful drink, and 2, to also use their social network to announce to at least hopefully the world that you can go on these opportunities.
That's a great picture.
Let's see, there's a whole host of really good ones on here. How about this one right here?
Yeah, so what you can see there is the large building on the left hand side. That's actually the habitation module. It's a big cylinder, and it's actually designed according to Dr. Zubrin's Mars Direct manuscript or book. I believe he published it. The idea is that you would build a habitation module that will go right on top of a rocket. So that explains the cylinder picture. So you would launch it from Earth, travel, send it to Mars, land on Mars, and that would be where the astronauts would live. The building right in front of it is kind of hard to see, but that's the greenhouse. Got really warm during the day. It wasn't very good to my plants. And the dome to the right, that was the science dome. And what's so cool about that science dome is that it probably had the best view in the entire station and the best acoustics. So sometimes I would sit myself there and play some music that I downloaded before the mission on my phone and sit like in the center of the room and just enjoy the vibe with the music.
It's a great way to combat isolation. Just have a little dance party.
So
there's a good looking crew.
Yep. So there's the 6 of us right there. From the back forward and from left to right, there's our crew engineer, Siobhan. There's Shayna. She was our XO. There was me, of course. Right there on the very right hand side in the back, that was Alex. She was our health and safety officer. So she took care of us if we were to become injured. There's only like a few cuts here and there, nothing major. And then up front on the left is Olivia. She was our crew scientist. She's actually a field scientist by training. And then our crew commander in the front and the right there is Dylan. And he's the one that I had met as a prospective grad student here at Purdue, in which he was the one that organized this entire expedition, and he successfully saw it through completion.
That's a great picture.
All right, and so look at that.
Yeah,
Out
so
on Mars.
this is a very good picture of the surrounding environment in the background, as well as showcasing the EVA suits. As you can see, they're kind of like hemisphere dome. You have some tubes going to the side which circulate air, and it's the backpack. The backpack is actually mounted on a hiking backpacking frame, and most of the weight sits on our hips, so that when we're doing our EVAs, we don't strain our back as we're walking. But if you look out in the environment, it very much looks like the pictures that we're seeing on Mars. It's it's a stunning environment, I have to say, and it really does look foreign or extraterrestrial if you ever get the chance to explore that area yourself around Hanksville.
I think what's interesting is it also looks very real, like the desert. So if the desert is what Mars looks like and Mars looks like the desert, like you start to get a sense of, maybe this is possible, that we can get a mission to Mars and we can sustain life for whatever length of time. But it just kind of crystallizes the possibility in my head, at least, to see the pictures and see that the simulation actually works and continues on the path. It's really neat.
One of the questions I get whenever I talk about this experience is, what's the point of going on these analog astronaut missions? And the answer I give to them is, it's much better and safer and easier to work out any issues that we may possibly face here on Earth, to simulate the conditions that we would living on Mars. And not only that, but because it's on Earth, it's much easier to reiterate or to iterate and discover best practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine that you are able to learn from the simulators that were before yours, lessons learned and what went well and what didn't go well, but also further the knowledge and research towards
Correct.
that end. Yeah.
Correct. Even NASA has their own analog stations. There's one in Johnson Space Center called Hera, and that simulates a lunar environment. Sometimes it can simulate a space station environment, and that simulates confinement and isolation. There's another NASA analog station called NEMO, which is off the coast of Florida, maybe the Florida Keys, if I recall correctly. My dad went to that one, and the station is actually underwater. So if you want to conduct an EVA, you actually have to put on a scuba suit, make sure you're neutrally buoyant, so that you simulate, 0G or as close as 0G environment as possible, as well as to the confinement and the isolation and even the limited resources. So different stations have different advantages and disadvantages, or emphasize one aspect of space exploration, or want to address one challenge. And from all these different stations, we start to get a very good big picture of what we're going to face when we actually do it ourselves, and we actually go out and start building settlements out in space, either on Moon or the Mars, or even in a station.
Awesome. Shannon, you had a question.
Yeah, Julio, thanks again for joining us. This has been super informative. My question has to deal with the food. So I always see astronaut food as that like the hydrated food in the packets. So the food that you were attempting to grow and study in the greenhouse, is that food that you would attempt to add to that or supplement on the side? Like what what were you growing and what would you have done with it? Or are we trying to get rid of the astronaut food?
Shannon, that is a really good question. I was the unofficial chef for my crew. If I hadn't gone into engineering, I would have actually gone into culinary arts. I have a deep passion for cooking. The challenge with astronaut food is that it's dehydrated to save on mass. So you ship up dry food and then you just combine water later, and then dehydrated food lasts longer. But the food that we would grow, say even at MDRS or maybe in future Mars settlement, would supplement whatever dry rations or supplies that the astronauts have. It's a great morale booster to have fresh green food. It's because dehydrated food, I have to admit, it can sometimes have a funny texture after it's been rehydrated. And I was not a fan of rehydrated butter. So I opted to exclude that particular ingredient from my cooking. But to answer your question again, if we can grow our food in a settlement or for astronauts, it allows us to have a more sustainable presence wherever we may be. And hopefully a self-sufficient settlement if we are able to increase our capacity for agriculture.
Have you figured out how to solve the water issue around that? Because I mean, obviously to grow things, you need water, and you already talked about water being limited. And so how do you create water when you're in space? So I want to know the answer to this.
So that's it depends. It depends. The quick answer is that you have to bring whatever water you want to use during your expedition. The more involved question, the more involved answer is that any environment that an astronaut's going to be living in is a closed environment. So that water goes somewhere. And, in terms of, waste, sometimes that wastewater has to be recycled into something that can be ingested again into the future, because you have to conserve the resources that you have.
Sure. Well, this has been a great discussion, Julio. I, again, echo everyone else saying I appreciate you joining us today and sharing a little bit about your experience. And I'm curious to know, you're a PhD candidate now, like what's next for you once your PhD is confirmed? Because we all know it will be. Like what kind of career do you see yourself in as you continue to look towards an astronaut future?
Man, I really wish I had that confidence in myself when I attend my weekly meetings with my advisor. But what comes next after this is a very good question. I haven't decided where I will go. It's open.
Okay.
Ideally would love to go to NASA and work there, and I believe it completely in NASA's mission, and I believe I would have a very long and fulfilling career there. But also the private space sector is also very, very active and dynamic and changing. And as a young engineer, you can learn so many skills that you don't have the opportunity to learn in a classroom setting. And that's also attractive. Going back to the National Lab, I did really enjoy that environment. I really enjoyed the work-life balance and the emphasis of continuing your growth and encouraging becoming a lifelong learner. It's going to be very hard to decide, but I guess I'll just have to put all my options on the table if I have more than one by the time I'm done, and write down a pros and cons list and decide. Hopefully I'll be done by the end of this calendar year.
That's an awesome goal to have. And yeah, for sure, you've got plenty of options out there. So which door opens first, and is that the right door for you? Definitely a tough decision to make.
Exactly. There's no one right path to becoming an astronaut.
Yeah. So any last piece of advice for our audience or anything that we may have missed that you wanted to share with us today?
Yes. I did not know that analog analog astronaut stations were accessible to non-astronaut individuals or non-astronaut candidates. Um, I knew they existed somewhat. I knew of that one that my dad did, Nemo, but I didn't know how many there were within the world, and there's many, many out there. You can become an analog astronaut even if you're not in STEM, even if you're not a scientist, even if you're not an engineer. You can assemble your own crew and apply for a slot to any station that you like, by yourself without any official institutional backing if you're interested. And that's what my crew did. Because we were from different institutions, it was our group application that we had to write a proposal, and they judged our proposal and said, yes, we would like you to come. If you want to try it out for yourself and see if becoming an astronaut is for you, becoming an analog astronaut, I would say, is a pretty good first step. And you can create your crew out of your own initiative. It's going to be a very fun and rewarding experience if you do.
That is good to know, because I'm sure there are plenty of engineering students out there and scientists and social scientists that, you know, are looking for some sort of experiential learning process or opportunity, and that could be a great fit for them. So
You're
thank
right.
you for that.
And it's not only them, but it's even the arts. Being a journalist, being a musician, being a writer, a novelist. Space doesn't just belong to the individuals in STEM. Space is going to be somewhere where we all can go one day.
That's a great quote. All right, Julio, we are going to close out the day with our final question, which, as you know, the university is heading into the final stretch of our Leading with Purpose campaign, and it's more important than ever for us to remember what guides us. So the question to you is, in one sentence, can you tell us what is your purpose?
That's a very good question. My purpose is to be a bridge builder, to make the inaccessible more accessible for everyone. Or at
Awesome.
least that's what I hope.
I think you're already doing that. You really are. You're telling your story. You're telling people that they don't have to be the same person that you are to be, you know, have the same experience. That's building bridges and certainly leading by example. That's great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and I really appreciate having this platform to share my experiences with everyone here.
Awesome. Well, everybody that's on the call, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourselves, I see plenty of you that are emoji clapping, but let's give Julio a round of applause for real.
Yay, thank you.
Yes. Thanks
Julio.
everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.